Before I tell you this story, I need to know something. Are you watching this alone at night in the wilderness? Maybe you're camping right now, hearing sounds outside your tent that don't quite match any animal you know. Or perhaps you're scrolling through your phone in some remote cabin, trying not to think about how far you are from the nearest town. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if this is your first time hearing about what really happens in America's national parks, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you about Canyonlands isn't in any park brochure. It's not in any training manual. And until 3 months ago, I wouldn't have believed it myself. My name is Maya Red Cloud. I'm a park ranger at Canyonlands National Park in Utah. But 3 months ago, I was living in California, working search and rescue in Yosemite, and my sister was still alive. Anna was 2 years younger than me, 31 years old, a wilderness guide with a master's degree in astronomy. She'd always loved the night sky, loved how the darkness between the stars seemed infinite. When she got the job leading night hikes at Canyonlands, she called me so excited I could hear her smiling through the phone. That was 18 months ago. The last time I heard her voice was 3 months ago at 2:47 in the morning, when my phone buzzed with a text message that woke me from a dead sleep. Maya, the stars are wrong. They're not where they should be. Something is watching from where the stars should be. I called her immediately. The phone rang 6 times, then went to voicemail. I left 3 messages, sent a dozen texts. Nothing. By dawn, I'd already called the Canyonlands Ranger Station, filed a missing person report, and was throwing clothes into a duffel bag for the 9-hour drive from Yosemite to Utah. But I was too late. They found Anna's body that afternoon at Angel Arch, a natural sandstone bridge in the Needles district. The official report said she'd fallen while climbing alone at night. Blunt force trauma. Death ruled accidental. Except Anna never climbed alone, never climbed at night. And when I saw her body at the medical examiner's office in Moab, her eyes were open, staring upward with an expression I'd never seen on a human face before. Pure existential terror. Like she'd seen something that broke her understanding of reality in the seconds before she died. The ME told me it was just muscle contractions, the way bodies sometimes freeze in the moment of death. But I knew my sister's face. I'd seen her scared before, seen her excited, seen her angry and joyful and everything in between. I'd never seen her look like that, like she'd glimpsed something vast and incomprehensible and hostile, something that didn't belong in our world. I quit my job in Yosemite 2 days after her funeral, applied to transfer to Canyonlands. The Park Service fast-tracked my application, probably because they were chronically understaffed, and I had 12 years of experience with wilderness SR, wildlife management, and emergency response. Within 6 weeks, I was packing up my apartment in California and driving east across the desert with everything I owned in the back of my truck. I told myself I was coming back to be close to family, to process my grief in the landscape where Anna had been happiest. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I was coming back because something about Anna's death didn't make sense, and I needed to understand what had happened to her. Needed to know why a woman who'd spent her entire adult life in wilderness environments would make the kind of rookie mistakes that killed her. The drive from Moab to the island in the Sky District Ranger Station takes about 45 minutes on Highway 191, then a winding road that climbs through red rock formations and juniper forests until you reach the plateau. I made the drive on a Monday morning in early October, the kind of crystalline autumn day when the sky is so blue it almost hurts to look at. The air smelled like sage and dust, and the particular scent of sandstone baking in high-altitude sun. The ranger station was a low building constructed from local stone, designed to blend with the landscape. 3 Park Service vehicles were parked outside, along with a few personal trucks. I pulled in at 7:45, 15 minutes early for my first day, and sat in my truck for a moment, gathering myself. Through the windshield, I could see the vast expanse of canyon country spreading out to the horizon. Red mesas, white-topped buttes, and a sky so enormous it made you feel simultaneously insignificant and connected to something ancient. Anna had loved this view. She'd sent me photos of sunrises from this exact spot, the light turning the rocks every shade of orange and crimson and gold. Looking at it now just made my chest ache. I grabbed my pack and headed inside. The interior was functional, organized for efficiency. Radio dispatch station, desk area, map-covered walls showing the district's trails and backcountry zones, lockers for gear. And standing near the coffee maker, waiting for me, was Chief Ranger Tom Whitehorse. He was Dene, maybe 58 or 60, with weathered brown skin and iron gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. His uniform was crisp despite the early hour, and his dark eyes studied me with the kind of careful attention that comes from decades of reading wilderness and people with equal skill. When he shook my hand, his grip was firm but not aggressive. "Ranger Red Cloud," he said. "Welcome to Canyonlands. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Your sister was a good employee, good person. Her death was a loss for everyone here." "Thank you," I managed. My throat felt tight. I'd prepared myself for this conversation, but it still hit harder than expected. "I knew your grandmother," Tom continued. "Agnes Blackhorse. She worked here in the 70s, back before the Park Service was good about hiring native rangers. She was tough. Taught me things about this landscape that weren't in any manual." He paused. "You look like her." I hadn't known that. My grandmother had died when I was 8, and I only had scattered memories of her. A small woman who smelled like sage and wood smoke, who used to take me and Anna on long walks in the desert near Shiprock and tell us stories about the land that seemed like myths until you looked closely and realized they were survival instructions. "Come on," Tom said. "Before we do the official orientation, there's something you need to see." He led me to a small office off the main room. On the wall, in a simple wooden frame, was a document. Not a map or a mission statement, but a typed list of rules. The paper was yellowed, the text formatted like an official memo, but the content made my skin prickle. Canyonlands National Park, Island in the Sky District Ranger Protocols for Anomalous Situations. Last updated, April 1987. 1. Never investigate disappearances alone after the stars disappear. If you observe constellations missing from their expected positions, return to the ranger station immediately and wait for daylight. Do not attempt solo rescue operations under starless skies. 2. If you encounter footprints that change from human boot patterns to animal claw patterns over the course of a trail, return to your vehicle immediately. Do not follow the tracks. Do not attempt to explain the transition. Report the location to a senior ranger. 3. When 3 coyotes call from 3 different mesas simultaneously in a triangular pattern around your position, turn off all lights, silence all equipment, and remain motionless for 10 minutes. Do not respond to any voices calling your name during this period, even if they sound like people you know. 4. Objects that cast shadows in directions that don't match the sun's position should not be touched or photographed. Mark the location with GPS, leave the area, and report to Chief Ranger. 5. If you see lights moving below ground level, visible through cracks in the sandstone. Do not investigate the source. These lights do not correspond to any cave systems or human activity. 6. During new moon periods, do not conduct solo patrols between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. If an emergency requires response during this window, travel in pairs minimum and maintain constant radio contact. 7. If you witness the sky above taking on a quality of depth or dimension that seems wrong, as if you're looking up into a void rather than at atmosphere and stars, seek immediate shelter in a structure or vehicle. Do not remain in open terrain under such conditions. These protocols are not suggestions. They are survival instructions based on documented incidents spanning 5 decades of Park Service operations in this district. Violation of protocols has resulted in 7 ranger deaths and 4 disappearances since 1958. I read it twice, then looked at Tom. This is a joke, right? Some kind of hazing for new rangers? His expression didn't change. Does it look like a joke? It looks like something written by someone who spent too much time alone in the desert. I kept my voice level, professional, but inside I was reeling. My first day on the job, and they were showing me what amounted to wilderness superstition dressed up in official formatting. Chief Ranger Whitehorse. I have a degree in wildlife biology from UC Davis, 12 years of SR experience. I've dealt with mountain lions, bears, extreme weather, lost hikers, and medical emergencies. I know what animal tracks look like. I know how light and shadow work in desert environments, and I know that protocol documents don't usually reference supernatural phenomena. No, Tom agreed. They don't, because most parks don't need them. Most parks operate according to normal natural laws. Canyonlands, specifically this district, has been different for as long as anyone can remember. Longer, if you believe the ancestral Puebloan petroglyphs in some of the alcoves. They show things that don't match any animals in the fossil record. Figures that aren't quite human. Symbols that represent astronomical events that shouldn't be visible from Earth. He crossed his arms. I'm not asking you to believe in anything supernatural, Ranger Red Cloud. I'm asking you to follow protocols that have kept rangers alive when conventional wisdom failed. Your sister knew these protocols. She'd been briefed on them, just like you're being briefed now. My stomach dropped. Anna knew about this? She did, and she followed them until she didn't. His voice softened slightly. 3 days before she died, she came to me with questions about Protocol 1. Wanted to know specifics about what stars disappearing meant. Had there been incidents where constellations went missing? How long did it usually last? I told her what I knew. She seemed satisfied, said she was just curious. 2 nights later, she went out alone to Angel Arch during a new moon, and we found her body the next day. The ache in my chest intensified. You think she was investigating something related to these protocols? I think your sister was smart and observant, and she saw something that made her concerned enough to ask questions. What she saw, I don't know. But whatever it was, it got her killed. Tom gestured to the framed document. These protocols exist because people died learning these lessons. Some of them were rangers, some were hikers, some were ancestral Puebloans 1,000 years ago who left warnings carved in stone. The specifics change, but the pattern is consistent. There are things in this landscape that don't behave according to normal rules, and ignoring that fact is dangerous. Before I could respond, the door opened and a younger man entered, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the Moab Coffee shop. He was Asian American, maybe 26 or 27, with a lean build and the kind of deep tan that comes from spending most of your time outdoors. His uniform was well worn, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in wilderness environments. "Morning, Chief," he said, then noticed me. "Oh, hey, you must be Maya. I'm Jake Chen. I'll be your partner for the first few weeks while you get oriented." He offered one of the coffees. "Figured you might need caffeine after the drive from California. This is from Moab Coffee Roasters, best in the area." I accepted the cup gratefully. "Thanks. And yes, I definitely need this." Tom nodded at Jake. "Show her around, introduce her to the daily routine, and Chen, show her the photos from Grand Viewpoint." Jake's expression shifted, became more serious. "You sure? First day and all? She needs to see them, especially given what happened to her sister." After Tom left, Jake led me outside to his patrol truck, a white Ford with the distinctive Park Service Arrowhead logo on the door. The morning was warming up fast, temperature already in the 60s and climbing. He pulled out his phone as we stood in the parking lot, the vast canyon landscape spreading out behind us. "Okay, so full disclosure," Jake said. "I'm going to show you something that's going to sound insane. I'm not asking you to believe me right away. I'm just asking you to look at the evidence and keep an open mind. Deal?" "Deal," I said, though my skepticism must have been obvious. He pulled up a photo gallery. "These are from 2 weeks ago. I was doing a routine patrol on the White Rim Trail, checking on some backpackers who had a permit for the area. Found their campsite abandoned, gear scattered. No sign of the hikers themselves. We launched a search. Never found them. But I did find these." He handed me the phone. The first photo showed footprints in red sand, clear as day. Boot prints, size 10 or 11, with the distinctive tread pattern of hiking boots. The stride was normal, the depth consistent with someone carrying a backpack. Standard wilderness tracks. "Okay," I said. "Someone was hiking. That's not unusual. Swipe to the next photo." I did. The same trail, maybe 20 feet further along. The boot prints were changing. The heel marks were deeper, more spread out. The toe impressions showed something that looked like claw marks, 4 or 5 distinct points instead of the rounded boot toe. "Keep going," Jake said quietly. Third photo. The prints were clearly transitioning. Half boot, half something else. The tread pattern was breaking up, being replaced by what looked like animal tracks, but wrong. Too large for a coyote. Wrong shape for a mountain lion. Fourth photo. 50 feet further down the trail. Full animal tracks now. But they weren't like any animal I'd studied in 12 years of wilderness work. 4-toed, heavily clawed, spaced in a gait that suggested something, moving on all fours, but with a stride length that was impossible for the track size. Fifth photo. The tracks leading to the edge of a cliff. Then nothing. No signs of a fall. No disturbance of the sand at the cliff base visible from Jake's vantage point. Just tracks that led to empty air and stopped. I looked up at him. "This is photoshopped. It has to be. I can show you the originals, the metadata, the GPS coordinates. I can take you to the location. The tracks were still visible 3 days ago before the wind covered them." Jake's voice was steady, matter of fact. "I've been working here for 4 years, Maya. I've seen this kind of thing 7 times. Sometimes it's boot prints turning into claws. Sometimes it's bare feet turning into hoof prints. Once it was a handprint on a cliff face that transitioned into something with too many fingers over the course of a 6-foot span. That's not possible. Human tracks don't transform into animal tracks. That violates basic biology." "Yeah," Jake agreed. "It does. And yet I've photographed it happening, documented the locations, filed reports. You know what the official explanation is? Erosion patterns. wind creating the illusion of transition, multiple animals coincidentally using the same trail, all perfectly reasonable scientific explanations that completely fail to account for what you can see with your own eyes. He took his phone back. I'm not trying to freak you out on your first day, but Tom's right. You need to know what you're dealing with. Your sister knew. She'd seen things too. We talked about it a few times. She was curious, wanted to understand the pattern. The coffee had gone cold in my hands. Did Anna ever show you anything? Photos? Evidence? Research? No, but she asked a lot of questions about the protocols, especially about the stars. Jake looked out at the canyon landscape. She was an astronomy person, right? She kept asking about Protocol 1, about what it meant when stars disappear, wanted to know if it was literal or metaphorical. I told her it was literal. There are nights when you look up and constellations that should be there just aren't. Not hidden by clouds, not blocked by light pollution, just gone, like someone erased them from the sky. And you believe this? I couldn't keep the skepticism out of my voice. I've seen it. 2 months ago, I was on overnight patrol near Upheaval Dome. Around midnight, I noticed Ursa Major was missing. The entire constellation, just a blank patch of sky where it should have been. I followed protocol, got in my truck, drove back here, and waited until dawn. By morning, the stars were back where they belonged. He met my eyes. Your sister died at Angel Arch during a new moon. Her last text to you was about stars being wrong. I don't think those things are unconnected. The conversation was interrupted by Tom's voice over the radio, calling all rangers for morning briefing. As Jake and I headed back inside, I found myself looking up at the sky, at the perfect blue emptiness where tonight's stars would appear in their familiar patterns, or at least where I'd always assumed they'd appear. For the first time in my career, I felt a whisper of doubt about how well I actually understood the landscape I'd sworn to protect. And somewhere in my memory, I heard my grandmother's voice from 25 years ago, on one of those desert walks when I was 8 years old. The land remembers things people forget, Maya, and the sky watches things people don't see. When you grow up, if you work in wild places, remember that. The old rules exist for reasons. Follow them. I'd thought she was telling stories. Now, standing in a ranger station looking at protocols about stars disappearing and footprints that transformed, I wondered if she'd been giving me a warning. My first call came 3 hours into my first shift. Jake and I were doing equipment checks when the radio crackled with dispatch's voice. All units, we have a welfare check request at White Rim Campsite 14. Dr. Harold McKenzie, permit holder, missed his scheduled satellite phone check-in. University of Arizona Astronomy Department, requesting we verify his status. Jake grabbed the radio. Unit 3 responding, ETA 45 minutes. The drive down to White Rim required taking the steep switchbacks of the Schaefer Trail, a dirt road that descended from the mesa top through layers of geological time, each turn revealing older and older rock formations. Jake drove with practiced ease while I studied the permit information on the laptop mounted between our seats. Mackenzie, Harold, age 62, Professor Emeritus, Optical Astronomy, permit issued for 6 days, solo camping, research purposes. I scrolled through his application notes. He was studying what he called stellar displacement anomalies, whatever that means. It means he was looking at stars that weren't where they should be, Jake said. His hands were tight on the steering wheel as we navigated a particularly sharp turn. The drop-off to our right was severe, maybe 400 feet of sheer sandstone cliff. Maya, you need to know something about Canyonlands. People have been disappearing here for generations. Not tourist accidents, Not people getting lost on trails. I mean vanishing. Experienced hikers, researchers, even rangers. The Park Service doesn't talk about it publicly because they don't want to start a panic. But the numbers are wrong. Wrong how? 14 people in the last 20 years. All solo campers or hikers. All during new moon periods. All in areas where they should have been easily found if they'd just gotten lost or injured. He glanced at me. Your sister makes 15. My chest tightened. The official report said she fell while climbing. Yeah, that's what the report says. But I saw where she fell. There were no climbing holds above her body. Nothing that suggested she was attempting an ascent. She was just standing at the base of Angel Arch. And then she was on the ground with massive head trauma, like something dropped her from a height. He paused. Her eyes were open. Did they tell you that? I saw her at the medical examiner's. Then you saw her expression. I've seen drowning victims, heart attacks, even a lightning strike. I've never seen anyone look like that, like they died seeing something impossible. We reached White Rim Road, the famous four-wheel drive trail that circles the district at the second level of canyon country. The landscape here was more exposed, less vegetation, just miles of white sandstone benches broken by red rock towers and the green ribbon of the Colorado River far below. Campsite 14 was at the end of a short spur road, positioned to give optimal views of the night sky, away from any light pollution. As we approached, I could see the campsite was wrong. The tent was partially collapsed, one side torn open. Equipment was scattered across the rock, and a high-end telescope lay on its side, the lens shattered into a starburst pattern. Jake stopped the truck 50 feet away. Stay behind me. Standard approach protocol. We got out, and immediately I noticed the smell. Not the usual wilderness sense of sage and stone. This was organic, wrong, like burned hair mixed with ozone. The kind of smell that makes your hindbrain scream warnings before your conscious mind can process why. Dr. Mackenzie, Jake called out. National Park Service. We're here to check on your welfare. No response, just the wind moving across the sandstone, making that particular whistling sound that desert canyons produce. Except the wind wasn't blowing. The air was completely still. We moved closer. The scattered equipment included star charts, notebooks, a laptop with a cracked screen, and what looked like specialized astronomical instruments I didn't recognize. The star charts were covered in handwritten notes, circles drawn around certain constellations, lines connecting stars in patterns that didn't match any standard astronomical notation. Then I saw him. Dr. Harold Mackenzie lay on his back on a flat section of white sandstone, about 20 feet from his destroyed tent. His body was positioned perfectly straight, arms at his sides, face turned upward to the sky, and his eyes were open, staring directly overhead, but they were wrong. The irises were burned away, leaving only white, like someone had shone an impossibly bright light directly into them, until the pigment was destroyed. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Jake was already on the radio, calling for backup, for medical response, for the investigation team. But he kept his distance from the body, and I noticed he wasn't looking directly at it. His gaze kept moving to the surrounding terrain, scanning the rock formations and cliff edges like he expected something to appear. I moved closer to Mackenzie, my SR training overriding my revulsion. I checked for a pulse I knew I wouldn't find. His skin was cold but not stiff yet, suggesting he'd died recently, maybe within the last 12 hours. There was no visible trauma except for his eyes. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, no indication he'd tried to flee or fight off an attacker. A notebook lay next to his right hand, open to the last page of handwritten notes. The The writing started neat and precise, then deteriorated into an increasingly frantic scrawl. I read the final entry aloud for Jake to hear. October 23rd, 10:47 p.m. Ursa Major has shifted 17 degrees from its expected position. Cross-checked with planetarium software, GPS coordinates, timestamp. No error in my calculations. The constellation has moved. Polaris is no longer true north, currently displaced by approximately 12 degrees. Either my equipment is catastrophically failing across multiple redundant systems, or something is displacing the stars themselves. I turned the page. The handwriting got worse. 11:15 p.m. Cassiopeia is wrong. The W formation is distorted, stretched, like something is pulling at the stars from behind. I can see darkness where the constellation should be, not the normal black of space. A darkness that has depth, dimension. It's moving. Dear God, it's moving closer. The final line was barely legible. It's not stars. It's eyes. They're all eyes. They're looking back. My hands were shaking. I set the notebook down carefully, trying to maintain crime scene protocol, even though every instinct was screaming at me to get away from this place. Maya, Jake said quietly. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. We need to leave, now. We can't just leave him. This is an active death investigation. Listen. I stopped moving and listened. At first I heard nothing except the desert silence. Then I caught it. A whistle, high-pitched and melodic, coming from the north. A few seconds later, another whistle from the east, different pitch but same eerie quality. Then a third from the south, completing a triangle around our position. Protocol 3. When 3 coyotes call from 3 different mesas simultaneously in a triangular pattern around your position, turn off all lights, silence all equipment, and remain motionless for 10 minutes. Except these weren't coyotes. They were too precise, too evenly spaced, too clearly intentional. Back to the truck, Jake said. Don't run. Don't make sudden movements. Just walk normally. We retreated to the vehicle, got inside, and Jake started the engine immediately. As we pulled away, I looked back at the campsite. For just a moment, I thought I saw 3 figures standing at the edges of the clearing, positioned exactly where the whistles had originated from. They were too tall, too thin, and their proportions were wrong in ways I couldn't quite process. Then we turned a corner, and they were gone. The drive back was silent, except for radio chatter coordinating the response. Team. Jake's jaw was tight, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. I kept thinking about Mackenzie's final words. It's not stars, it's eyes. They're all eyes. We reached the ranger station at dusk. Tom met us outside, his expression grim. Chen briefed me over radio. Investigation team is heading down at first light. Nobody goes back there until sunrise, and nobody goes alone. Chief, I said, this needs to be escalated. This is a federal death investigation in a national park. We need FBI, we need to follow protocol. Tom interrupted. Get your statement written up, then go to your quarters and stay there until morning. Trust me on this, Red Cloud. Your first night is always the worst. I wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped me. He'd seen something like this before. Multiple times, probably. My ranger quarters were a small cabin, about a quarter mile from the main station, one of 6 residences for permanent staff. It was basic, but functional. Bedroom, bathroom, small kitchen, living area. Anna had lived in the identical unit next door. I'd been avoiding looking at her place since I arrived, but now as I walked to my cabin, I couldn't help glancing at her dark windows. I made dinner, wrote up my incident report, tried to process what I'd seen. Mackenzie's burned white eyes, the notebook entries about stars moving, the 3 whistles forming a triangle. All of it felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't have the framework to solve. At 9:30, I got a text from Jake. Lights off by 10. Keep your radio on. Don't respond to anything outside. First night protocol. I texted back. What happens on the first night? Things test you. Things that know you're new here. Follow the protocols. You'll be fine. I turned off all the lights at 9:55 and sat in darkness on my couch, curtains drawn, radio crackling softly with occasional check-ins from the overnight dispatcher. The cabin was quiet, except for the settling sounds of wood and the distant whisper of wind through juniper trees. At 11:23, I heard her voice. Maya? Anna's voice, clear as day, coming from right outside my front door. Maya, I'm so cold out here. Can you let me in? My heart stopped. My hand moved automatically toward the door handle before my brain caught up and froze me in place. That was Anna's voice. Exact pitch, exact tone. The slight breathiness she got when she was scared or uncomfortable. Maya, please. I've been trying to get home. I'm lost. I don't know where I am. Please open the door. Tears were running down my face. Every fiber of my being wanted to open that door, to help my sister who sounded so frightened and alone. My hand was actually on the handle when I remembered the protocol. Do not respond to any voices calling your name during this period, even if they sound like people you know. I pulled my hand back and pressed it against my mouth to keep from crying out loud. Maya, don't you love me anymore? The voice was getting desperate now, taking on a wounded quality. I'm your sister. I need you. Please, it's so cold and dark and I can't see the stars anymore. Maya, please. I sat perfectly still, tears streaming, holding my breath. The voice changed, got angry. Open this door. Open it now. I know you're in there. I can hear your heartbeat. I can smell your fear. Open the fucking door, Maya. That wasn't Anna. Anna never swore, and her voice never dropped into that register, that inhuman growl underneath the human speech. You think silence will save you? The voice was changing further now, losing its human quality entirely. You think your protocols matter? Your sister thought the protocols would save her too. She was wrong. She died screaming, Maya. She died looking up at what lies between the stars, and she understood too late that you can't unsee that. We're inside her memories now. We know everything she knew, including how much she loved you. The voice that wasn't Anna anymore laughed, a sound like breaking glass. We'll see you soon, little sister. We'll show you what Anna saw. We'll show you what's watching from where the stars should be. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. No wind, no distant traffic, no animal sounds. Just the crushing weight of emptiness pressing against the walls of my cabin. I sat frozen for the full 10 minutes protocol required. When my phone finally buzzed with a text, I nearly screamed. It was Jake. First night always sucks. You followed protocol. You're alive. That's what matters. I texted back with shaking hands. What was that? His response came immediately. Something that knows you're here now. Something that knew your sister. Get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow we start teaching you how to survive what's watching us. I didn't sleep. I sat in the darkness of my cabin until dawn, listening to the silence and wondering what Anna had seen in her final moments that had left her eyes frozen open in terror. Whatever it was, it knew my name now. It knew my voice. It had worn my sister's identity like a mask. And somewhere out there in the canyon country, 14 other people had vanished after hearing their own version of this. Anna made 15. I was determined not to become 16. The morning after my first night, I started digging. Tom had told me to focus on learning patrol routes and standard procedures, but I couldn't let go of what had happened to Anna. Couldn't stop hearing that voice outside my cabin, wearing my sister's identity like stolen clothing. I started with the missing persons files. The ranger station kept paper records going back 40 years, stored in filing cabinets in a back office that smelled like dust and old paper. Tom was out on patrol, and the administrative assistant didn't question when I said I was familiarizing myself with district history. 14 disappearances in 20 years. I spread the files across an empty desk and started looking for patterns. Rebecca Chen, age 29, vanished July 7th, 2003. Solo backpacker, experienced wilderness traveler, permit for a 3-day trip in the Needles district. Last seen at her campsite by other hikers. When they returned the next morning to check on her, her tent was empty, gear untouched, but Rebecca was gone. Search lasted 8 days, covered over 100 square miles. No trace. Her journal was recovered from her tent. The final entry, dated July 6th at 11:30 p.m. Something is wrong with Polaris. It's not where my compass says it should be. Either I'm having some kind of neurological event, or the stars have moved. I should hike out at first light. She never made it to first light. Michael Torres, age 47, disappeared October 19th, 2007. Astronomy hobbyist, had permits to photograph night sky from remote locations. Last radio contact at 10:15 p.m., reporting excellent viewing conditions. When he missed his morning check-in, rangers found his camera equipment set up at Grand View Point, tripod still in place, but Michael was gone. The camera's memory card showed 237 photos of the night sky, the last one taken at 11:42 p.m. In that final image, there was a darkness in the sky where Orion should have been. Not clouds, not atmospheric distortion, just an absolute black void in the shape of the constellation, like something had erased those stars from existence. Sarah and David Kemper, ages 33 and 35, vanished together March 3rd, 2011. Married couple, both geologists, conducting research on ancestral Pueblo and dwelling sites. Found their research camp at False Kiva abandoned, notes scattered, both satellite phones left behind. Their field journal mentioned unusual astronomical observations and modifications to ancient petroglyphs that weren't documented in any archaeological surveys. The final entry, in Sarah's handwriting, the petroglyphs at False Kiva show figures that aren't human. They're tall, thin, and they're positioned as if looking down from above. David thinks they represent sky watchers, astronomical observers, but the proportions are wrong, and there are symbols carved around them that match star patterns, except the patterns don't correspond to any constellations visible from Earth. It's like the ancestral Puebloans were documenting something they saw in the sky that shouldn't exist. I kept reading. Jennifer Walsh, disappeared 2014. Marcus Johnson, 2016. Elena Rodriguez, 2018. The pattern was consistent. All solo travelers or small groups, all during new moon periods when the sky would be darkest, all reporting astronomical anomalies before they vanished. Stars moving, constellations disappearing, darkness where light should be. And then I found Anna's file. Reading it was like being stabbed. The official incident report was clinical, professional, detached. But clipped to it was her personal journal, recovered from her ranger quarters. I hadn't known the Park Service had this. Nobody had given it to me after her death. My hand shook as I opened it to the final entries. October 10th. Went to False Kiva today following up on reports of vandalism at the archaeological site. Found something disturbing. Someone has been modifying the petroglyphs, carving new symbols around the ancient ones. The new carvings show astronomical coordinates, but they're wrong. They point to spaces between constellations, to voids where nothing should exist. Took photos, will report to Tom. October 14th. Saw 3 people at False Kiva after dark. They shouldn't have been there. Area is closed after sunset. Watched from a distance. They were setting up astronomical equipment, but modified. Telescopes pointed at wrong angles. Instruments arranged in patterns that matched the ancestral Puebloan symbols. Couldn't get close enough to intervene without blowing my cover. Will return with backup. October 17th. Researched the 3 people I saw. Brothers Ethan and Cole Winters and their cousin Sienna Graves, all from Colorado. Ethan is an astrophysicist, published some fringe papers about void astronomy and interstitial space observation that got him laughed out of academia. Cole has a record: assault, trespassing on sacred sites. Sienna is harder to track. No social media, no clear employment history. But all 3 have permits for extended stays in the park. I think they're conducting some kind of illegal research. October 20th. Something happened tonight that I can't explain rationally. Was doing solo patrol near Angel Arch around midnight. Looked up at the sky and Cassiopeia was gone. Not hidden by clouds, just absent. Empty black space where the constellation should be. Felt dizzy, nauseous, like my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Then I heard whistling. 3 sources, triangular pattern. Followed protocol, got back to my truck, waited 10 minutes in silence. When I looked up again, the stars were back. I need to talk to Margaret Tizot. If anyone knows about this, it's her. October 22nd. Visited Margaret this morning. She told me things I'm still trying to process. There are entities that exist in the spaces between stars, not aliens, not anything with physical form as we understand it. Things that perceive our dimension from outside it, that can reach through when certain conditions align. The ancestral Puebloans knew about them, created ceremonies to keep boundaries intact. But there's also a corrupted version of the ceremony, one that doesn't maintain boundaries, but dissolves them, opens doorways. Margaret thinks Ethan, Cole, and Sienna are attempting this corrupted ceremony. She's right. I've seen the evidence. I need to stop them before someone gets hurt. Going to Angel Arch tonight to document their activities. If I don't come back, tell Maya I love her. Tell her to talk to Margaret So. Tell her to be careful of the stars. That was the last entry. She died that night. I sat in the office for a long time, tears dripping onto the paper, making Anna's handwriting blur. She'd known. She'd figured out what was happening and tried to stop it alone. And whatever she'd encountered at Angel Arch, it had killed her. I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully returned the files. Tom couldn't know I'd been digging into this, not yet, but I needed to follow Anna's trail, starting with Margaret So. Jake found me at lunch, saw my expression, and didn't ask questions. You look like you need to take a drive. I know a good place to clear your head. I need to find Margaret So. Elder woman, Navajo, lives somewhere near Dead Horse Point, according to Anna's journal. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I know Margaret. She's Dine. Been living on the res boundary for longer than anyone can remember. She helps with traditional ceremonies, consultations on cultural resources. Also helps with the other stuff, the things we can't explain. He grabbed his keys. I'll drive you. She doesn't like strangers showing up alone. The drive to Margaret's home took 45 minutes on increasingly rough roads. We left Park Service land and entered the edge of Navajo Nation, the landscape becoming more remote, more ancient. Her home was a traditional hogan, 8-sided, built from logs and red earth, with a smaller modern structure beside it for practical living. Smoke rose from a chimney, and the air smelled like juniper burning. Margaret So sat outside on a wooden bench in the autumn sunlight. She was tiny, maybe 87 or 88 years old, wearing traditional velvet clothing and turquoise jewelry that caught the light. Her hair was white, pulled back in a traditional bun, and her eyes were clouded with cataracts. But when she looked at me as we approached, I had the unsettling feeling she saw more than my physical form. "Maya Red Cloud," she said, before Jake could introduce me. "You look like Agnes, your grandmother. You have her eyes, her cheekbones. You have her gift, too, whether you want it or not." "You knew my grandmother?" "I knew Agnes Blackhorse, yes, before she married and became Agnes Red Cloud. We were young together, learned the ceremonies together. She was powerful, saw things clearly, until she saw too much, and it broke her." Margaret gestured to the bench. "Sit. Your friend can wait in his truck. This conversation is between us." Jake nodded and retreated. I sat next to Margaret, feeling like a child called before a stern but fair teacher. "Your sister came to see me 3 days before she died," Margaret said. "Beautiful girl, smart, curious, like you. She'd discovered something that frightened her. 3 people performing a ceremony they shouldn't know, using knowledge they shouldn't have. Ethan and Cole Winters, Sienna Graves. Yes, descendants of Josiah Winters, who came to this territory in 1873, claiming to study ancestral Puebloan ruins. But he was studying something else, something older. The ancestral Puebloans knew about the Star Watchers, entities that exist in the voids between stars, in the spaces our eyes interpret as emptiness, but which are actually full of awareness, hunger, something vast. Margaret's clouded eyes stared past me, seeing into distance or memory. The old people created ceremonies to acknowledge the Star Watchers, to maintain boundaries between our world and theirs. Respectful ceremonies. Keep to your realm, we'll keep to ours. This worked for thousands of years, but Josiah Winters found descriptions of a different ceremony, a corrupted version. Instead of maintaining boundaries, it dissolves them, opens doors, lets the Star Watchers reach through into our dimension, lets them feed. Feed on what? On sight, on awareness, on the terror of understanding that you're being observed by something incomprehensible. She turned her full attention to me. "Your sister saw too much, Maya. She followed those 3 to Angel Arch the night they performed the ceremony. She witnessed them opening a door, saw what looked through from the other side. The Star Watchers took her eyes first, so she couldn't warn anyone about what she'd seen. Then, they took her life." My throat was tight. Why? Why would anyone deliberately try to contact these things? Because humans are stupid and arrogant and think power is worth any price. Ethan Winters believes he can control the Star Watchers, harness them, use them to see beyond our dimensional limitations. He's wrong. You can't control something that exists outside the rules that govern our reality. You can only survive it or die to it. Margaret stood slowly, joints creaking, and gestured for me to follow her into the hogan. Inside, the space was warm from a central fire, walls covered with woven blankets and ceremonial items. She moved to a shelf and selected several objects, placing them in a leather pouch. "Obsidian," she said, showing me a piece of black volcanic glass napped into a blade shape. "Formed from the earth's fire, represents our world's substance. White sage, for cleansing and protection. Corn pollen, sacred to our people, represents life and growth. And this," she held up a small, irregular piece of metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Meteorite iron, forged in the heart of a star, fell to Earth millennia ago. Your grandmother gave this to me for safekeeping. Now it returns to her bloodline. She placed all the items in the pouch and handed it to me. The weight was surprising, heavier than it should be. Your grandmother was Agnes Blackhorse before she married. She knew the old star ceremonies, the proper ways to maintain boundaries. These three, Ethan, Cole, Sienna, they learned the corrupted version, the one that doesn't ask, the Star Watchers to stay away but calls them down to feed, and they need one more thing to complete it fully. What? Black horse blood. Your bloodline. Your grandmother refused them when they approached her 40 years ago. They killed her husband in retaliation, made it look like a car accident. Then they waited, watching, knowing eventually another Black Horse descendant would come to this land. Margaret's expression was grave. Anna was targeted because of who she was. You're marked now, too. They know you're here. They know you're investigating. And they need your willing participation or your death to complete what they've started. How do I stop them? I'll teach you what I can. The counter ritual, the proper ceremony to close doors they've opened. But it's dangerous, Maya. The Star Watchers don't release their attention easily. Once you stand against them, they'll focus on you completely. You'll see things that will damage your mind. You'll understand cosmic truths humans aren't meant to comprehend. Your grandmother tried this in 1974 and spent the next 30 years in psychiatric facilities, drawing the same symbols over and over, trying to map what she'd seen in the spaces between stars. I thought about Anna's final text. The stars are wrong. Something is watching from where the stars should be. Teach me, I said. Whatever it takes. I won't let Anna's death be meaningless. Margaret nodded slowly. Then we begin. But first, you need to understand who you're dealing with. She showed me photographs, documents, research papers. Ethan Winters, 34 years old, astrophysicist with a doctorate from MIT. Published several papers on void astronomy and interstitial space observation that proposed the darkness between stars wasn't empty, but filled with exotic matter that could be conscious, aware, watching. His academic career ended when he claimed to have observed eye-like structures in deep space telescope data, dismissed as having a mental breakdown. Cole Winters, 31, Ethan's younger brother. High school dropout, history of violence and trespassing. Arrested twice for breaking into archaeological sites on Navajo Nation land. Claimed he was receiving messages from the Ancient Ones. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, refused treatment. Sienna Graves, 29, their cousin. Her file was thinner, more mysterious. Degree in comparative mythology, but no employment records, no social media presence. The few photos Margaret had showed a thin woman with intense eyes and an expression that suggested she knew secrets others didn't. All three are here now, Margaret said. Permits for extended research in the park. And according to my sources, Sienna disappeared 6 days ago. Hasn't checked in. Hasn't returned to her registered campsite. The brothers are still active. Where are they performing the ceremony? False Kiva, an ancestral Puebloan alcove site in the Island in the Sky district, difficult to access, closed to the public to protect the archaeology, but perfect for their purposes. Ancient ceremonial space, clear views of the night sky, remote enough that they won't be interrupted. I knew False Kiva. Anna had mentioned it in her journal. A small stone structure built into a cliff alcove used by the ancestral Puebloans for reasons archaeologists still debated. Some thought it was astronomical observatory. Others believed it was ceremonial, religious, a place to contact the divine. I need to see it, I said, not alone, and not unprepared. Margaret spent the next 3 hours teaching me basic protection prayers, showing me how to use the items in the bundle, explaining the structure of the counter ritual I'd need to perform if I confronted the Star Watchers directly. It was like trying to learn a language and a martial art simultaneously while someone explained quantum physics. My head ached with the effort of absorbing information that felt both ancient and impossibly alien. By the time Jake drove me back to the ranger station, the sun was setting, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and crimson. I felt both more prepared and more terrified than I'd been that morning. "Margaret doesn't teach just anyone," Jake said quietly. "The fact that she's working with you means this is serious. Worse than usual. How much do you know about what's happening?" "Enough to follow the protocols, not enough to fight it directly. That's not my role." He glanced at me. "But I'll back you up however I can. Your sister was good people. If these 3 had something to do with her death, they need to be stopped." That night, I convinced Tom to let me access False Kiva for an archaeological assessment. He was reluctant, but I had seniority from my Yosemite years, and officially I was qualified to survey cultural resource sites. Jake and I hiked in the next morning, following a cairned route across slick rock that eventually led to a narrow cliff face and a barely visible alcove about 60 feet up. The climb wasn't technical, but it was exposed, requiring careful attention. When we reached the alcove, I understood immediately why this place felt significant. The alcove was maybe 20 feet deep and 30 feet wide, open on one side to sweeping views of canyon country. The walls were covered in ancestral Puebloan petroglyphs, spirals, handprints, figures that might be human or might be something else. But there were also newer carvings. Someone had used modern tools to add symbols around the ancient ones, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to suggest angles that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space, geometries that made my eyes water when I tried to focus on them. In the center of the alcove, someone had arranged astronomical equipment. Not normal telescopes, but instruments that had been modified, lenses ground at wrong angles, mirrors positioned to reflect darkness rather than light. Star charts were scattered across the stone floor, covered in notations and calculations. The charts showed constellations, but with additional markings, coordinates pointing to the spaces between stars, to voids where nothing should exist. And there was dried blood on the stones. Not a lot, but enough to suggest repeated small offerings. The pattern matched what Margaret had described: boundary dissolution, opening doors. Jake photographed everything while I collected samples, documented the modifications. This was evidence of something, though I wasn't sure what charges would even apply. Vandalism of archaeological resources, certainly. But how do you charge someone with attempting to contact cosmic entities? We were preparing to leave when I saw it, scratched into the stone near the blood stains. A single word in Anna's handwriting, carved with something sharp, probably her pocket knife. Run. She'd been here, in this exact spot, and she'd left a warning. We made it back to the trailhead at dusk. I was exhausted, disturbed by what we'd found, already planning how to present this to Tom in a way that would trigger a proper investigation. Jake had driven separately and left first, needing to file his own report. I was loading gear into my truck when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see a man approaching across the parking area. Tall, maybe 34 or 35, with the kind of lean build that comes from spending time outdoors, but not from hard physical labor. He wore expensive hiking gear and carried himself with casual confidence. His eyes were what caught my attention. Pale blue, intense, too aware. "Ranger Red Cloud," he said, stopping about 10 feet away. I've been hoping to meet you. Your sister spoke of you often, toward the end. My hand moved to my service weapon without conscious thought. Who are you? Ethan Winters. I'm a researcher studying astronomical phenomena in the park. I had the pleasure of meeting Anna several times before her unfortunate accident. His smile didn't reach his eyes. She was curious about my work, wanted to understand what I was observing. By the end, she did understand. Understood that the spaces between stars are full, not empty, that we're being watched from dimensions we can barely perceive, that the darkness between pinpoints of light is alive and aware and hungry. Step back. Now. He raised his hands in mock surrender, but didn't move. Your sister wouldn't help us open the door wider. She clung to the old ways, the ceremonies of maintenance and boundary keeping. She didn't understand that boundaries are meant to be crossed, that knowledge is worth any price. But you're different, aren't you? You're trained in science, in rational thought. You can see the opportunity here. The opportunity to do what? Get more people killed? The opportunity to evolve, to see beyond our limited dimensional perspective, to understand what's actually out there, watching us from the voids. Ethan's expression shifted, became almost pitying. Anna died because she fought against something inevitable. She could have lived if she'd simply accepted her role in the ceremony. You don't have to make the same mistake. My radio crackled with Jake's voice doing a routine check-in. Ethan glanced toward the sound, then back at me. We'll talk again soon, Ranger Red Cloud. When the stars are right, when the new moon comes and the sky is dark enough to see what's really there. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the gathering darkness between rock formations. I stood there shaking, one hand on my weapon, the other clutching Margaret's protection bundle through my shirt. He'd known Anna. He'd probably been there when she died, and he'd just threatened me, or invited me, or both. I radioed Jake, told him about the encounter. His response was immediate. Get back to your quarters. Lock the doors. I'm calling Tom and Margaret. Nobody goes anywhere alone until we figure this out. As I drove back through the darkness, I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see Ethan's face reflected in the glass. The sky above was clear, stars beginning to emerge as full dark arrived. I found myself watching the constellations, making sure they stayed where they belonged, making sure no darkness spread where light should be. Anna had seen something in these stars, something that had killed her. And now whatever she'd seen, knew I was looking for it too. The protection bundle felt warm against my chest, meteorite iron that had fallen from the stars themselves, forged from the same cosmic fire that these entities existed between. Margaret said it would protect me. I hoped she was right, because the new moon was 3 days away, and I had a feeling that's when everything would come to a head, when the sky would be dark enough to see what was really watching us from the spaces between the light. The new moon arrived on a Tuesday. We had 3 days to prepare, and Tom used every hour. He made calls I wasn't supposed to hear, conversations with people who understood what we were really dealing with. By Monday afternoon, we had backup that went beyond standard Park Service protocol. The briefing took place in the Ranger Station conference room at 6 p.m., with the sun setting through the windows and casting long shadows across the topographic maps spread on the table. 8 rangers from various districts, 4 San Juan County Sheriff's deputies, and 2 FBI agents who'd driven down from Salt Lake City. Agent Martinez was maybe 40, with the weathered look of someone who'd worked rural cases for years. Agent Zhao was younger, maybe 32, and had the intense focus of someone who'd seen things that didn't fit in official reports. Tom stood at the head of the table, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. Thank you all for responding on short notice. What I'm about to brief you on will sound unusual. Some of you will be skeptical. That's fine. But I need everyone to follow protocols exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. We've lost people in this district who thought they knew better. He pulled up photos on the projector. Ethan and Cole Winters, Sienna Graves. These 3 individuals are persons of interest in multiple incidents, including the death of Ranger Anna Red Cloud 3 months ago. They're currently in the park with valid permits, but we have reason to believe they're conducting illegal activities at protected archaeological sites. What kind of illegal activities? One of the deputies asked. Tom glanced at me, then back at the group. Vandalism of cultural resources, trespassing in closed areas, and based on evidence collected by Ranger Maya Red Cloud and Officer Chen, we believe they may be connected to disappearances dating back 20 years. He pulled up more photos. False Kiva, the modified petroglyphs, the astronomical equipment. They've established 2 primary sites, False Kiva in the island in the Sky District, and Angel Arch in the Needles District. Both are remote. Both are near ancestral Puebloan ceremonial locations. We have surveillance teams ready to deploy to both sites. Agent Martinez leaned forward. And we're expecting them to return to these locations tonight, because tonight is the new moon, I said. All eyes turned to me. Every disappearance in the pattern occurred during new moon periods, when the sky is darkest, when certain stars become more visible and certain other things become possible. Things? Zhao asked, one eyebrow raised. Astronomical phenomena, Tom said carefully. Events that have been documented but not explained. We're treating this as a joint operation. Park Service takes lead on resource protection. Sheriff's Department handles potential arrests. FBI observes and documents for possible federal charges. He pulled up a map showing both locations and the positions where teams would deploy. Rules of engagement. Nobody goes in alone. Nobody investigates unusual sightings without backup. If you observe anything that doesn't make sense, anything that contradicts your training or understanding of natural phenomena, you report immediately and withdraw to your vehicle. Do not attempt to intervene alone. What exactly are we expecting to see? Martinez asked. Tom looked at him directly. Honestly, I don't know. But based on historical incidents, you may observe lights that shouldn't be there, figures moving in ways that aren't physically possible, and changes in the night sky that your equipment won't explain. Follow protocols. Trust your partners. And if I give the order to evacuate, you evacuate immediately. He distributed copies of the protocols, the same ones I'd seen on my first day. Several people read them with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Agent Zhao's face remained neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten when he reached Protocol 7 about the sky taking on wrong dimensions. Team assignments, Tom continued. Team 1, False Kiva, that's me, Ranger Red Cloud, Officer Chen, and Deputy Morrison. Team 2, Angel Arch, Ranger Stevens, Agent Martinez, Deputy Hall, and Deputy Keene. Team 3, Mobile Response Unit, Agent Zhao and Rangers Wilson and Patterson. We deploy at 2100 hours. Maintain radio contact at 15-minute intervals. Any questions? Yeah, Deputy Morrison said. Why does this feel less like a law enforcement operation and more like a horror movie setup? Several people laughed nervously. Tom didn't smile. Because sometimes reality is stranger than fiction, Deputy. And in this district, we've learned to respect that strangeness. The protocols aren't jokes. They're survival instructions written in the blood of people who didn't follow them. We deployed at 9 p.m. Jake drove our truck to a position about half a mile from False Kiva, close enough to observe through night vision equipment, but far enough to maintain some safety margin. Tom rode with us, while Deputy Morrison followed in his patrol vehicle. The night was clear, temperature dropping fast, and the sky was that particular shade of black that only comes with new moons in remote locations. At 9:45, we were in position. Through night vision binoculars, I could see the alcove where False Kiva sat, a darker shadow against the cliff face. No movement yet, no lights, just the empty landscape and the void of sky above. Radio check-ins came through at 10 p.m. Team 2 was in position at Angel Arch. Team 3 was mobile, patrolling the access roads. Everything quiet, everything normal. At 10:37, Jake stiffened. Movement at False Kiva, 3 figures climbing up. I adjusted my binoculars and saw them. 3 people making the ascent to the alcove, moving with practiced ease despite the darkness. Even through night vision, I recognized Ethan's height, Cole's broader build. The third had to be Sienna, thinner, more graceful on the rock. "Contact," Tom radioed to all units. "Suspects arriving at False Kiva. All teams maintain positions and observe." We watched as they reached the alcove and immediately began setting up equipment. Not the modified telescopes this time, but something else. They arranged objects in a circle, lit what looked like candles or lamps, creating a ring of light in the darkness. Then, they positioned themselves at 3 points around the circle and began to move in synchronized patterns. "They're performing some kind of ceremony," Jake muttered. "Margaret said this would happen. The corrupted ritual." At 11:15, my radio crackled with Team 2's voice. "Unit 3 to all units, we have activity at Angel Arch. Lights appearing in the structure, no visible source. Looks like bioluminescence, but wrong color. Repeat, lights appearing with no apparent source." "Document and observe," Tom responded. "Do not approach." At 11:23, the stars began to disappear. It started with Cassiopeia, the distinctive W formation in the northern sky. I was watching it because Anna's journal had mentioned it, because Mackenzie's notes had described it changing. As I stared, one of the stars in the constellation simply winked out. Not like a cloud passing over it. It was there, and then it wasn't. Like someone had erased it from existence. "Tom," I said, my voice tight. "Cassiopeia. Watch Cassiopeia." He lifted his binoculars toward the northern sky. Jesus Christ. Another star disappeared. Then another. Within 2 minutes, the entire constellation was gone, leaving a void of absolute darkness where it had been. And the darkness was spreading, moving across the sky like an infection, erasing Andromeda, Perseus, parts of Ursa Major. "All units," Tom radioed, his voice controlled but urgent. "We have confirmation of stellar disappearance phenomenon. Document, but do not investigate. If the darkness spreads directly overhead, evacuate to vehicles immediately." Through the night vision, I watched the 3 figures at False Kiva. They were chanting now, their voices carrying across the canyon in harmonics that shouldn't be possible for human vocal cords. And they were changing. Their bodies were elongating, stretching upward like shadows cast by a setting sun, except there was no sun. Their proportions were wrong. Legs too long, arms too thin, spines bending at angles that should have been anatomically impossible. "What the fuck are we seeing?" Deputy Morrison breathed over the radio. "Document everything," Tom ordered. "Stay in your vehicles." The radio crackled with Team 2's voice, but it was breaking up, distorted by interference that sounded like static mixed with whispers. "Unit 3, visual on suspects." Jesus Christ, they're changing. They're The transmission dissolved into white noise. "Team 2, repeat," Tom called. "Team 2, what is your status?" Only static answered. Through my binoculars, I saw the 3 figures at False Kiva had completed their transformation. They no longer looked remotely human. They were tall, impossibly tall, maybe 9 or 10 feet high, with skin that had darkened to match the starless sky. And their eyes had become voids, empty black circles that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Then something else appeared in the alcove with them. Something vast. It was tall. That's the wrong word, but I don't have a better one. It existed in a direction that wasn't up. When you looked at it, your eyes tried to make sense of angles that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. It was like watching a 4-dimensional object passing through our 3-dimensional reality, and my brain could only process fragments of what it actually was. Tall and thin, and made of the absence of light. Like someone had carved a humanoid shape out of the darkness between stars and given it motion. I felt my sanity starting to crack just looking at it. Jake was breathing too fast, beside me, hyperventilating. Tom had gone completely silent, staring through his binoculars with an expression of horrified recognition. "That's what Anna saw," I whispered. "That's what killed her." The radio exploded with screaming. "Team 2 at Angel Arch. It's here, oh God, it's coming down from the sky, it's..." Ranger Stevens' voice, high-pitched with terror. "I can see eyes in the darkness. They're watching us there." Then silence. Complete radio silence from Team 2. "Team 3, respond to Angel Arch immediately," Tom ordered. "Team 2, status check. Team 2, respond." Nothing. Just the whisper of static that might have been wind or might have been something else. The entity at False Kiva turned its attention toward us. I felt its gaze like physical pressure, like being crushed under the weight of cosmic awareness. It looked directly at our position, through the darkness, through the half-mile of distance, through the metal of our truck. "Drive," Tom said. "Drive now." Jake started the engine, but before he could put it in gear, something hit us from the side. The truck rocked violently, and I saw a face pressed against my window. Cole Winters. Except it wasn't Cole anymore. His face had stretched, elongated, skin darkening to that light-absorbing black. His eyes were voids, and when he opened his mouth, I saw too many teeth arranged in too many rows. He spoke, and his voice had harmonics, multiple frequencies layered on top of each other. "Sister blood tastes sweeter. Anna fought for 6 minutes before the Star Watcher took her. Will you last longer?" I screamed. Jake hit the gas. The truck lurched forward with Cole still clinging to the side, impossibly strong fingers digging into the metal. Tom was yelling into the radio, calling for all units to evacuate, to get out of the area immediately. We hit 40 miles per hour on the dirt road, 50, 60. Cole was keeping pace, running alongside the truck with a gait that was wrong, legs bending backward, forward, sideways, moving through dimensions my eyes couldn't track. His face was at my window, grinning with those impossible teeth. She saw the truth, Maya. She saw what lives in the dark between the stars. She saw that we're not alone, that we've never been alone, that the universe is full of awareness and it's all watching us. Jake swerved hard, trying to shake him off. Cole lost his grip for a moment, tumbled away, but I saw him in the side mirror getting up, starting to run after us again. Except he wasn't running on the ground anymore. He was running parallel to it, sometimes on the cliff faces, sometimes on nothing at all, moving through space like gravity was optional. 75, Jake shouted, pushing the truck as fast as it would go on the rough road. I'm at 75 and he's keeping pace. The radio was chaos now. Agent Zhao reporting that Team 2 wasn't responding, that there was body cam footage coming through, but it showed impossible things, showed Ranger Stevens rising into the air, lifted by nothing, pulled upward into the patch of starless sky, and then gone, just gone. Tom was trying to coordinate, trying to maintain order, but the cosmic interference was getting worse. Every transmission was breaking up, dissolving into whispers in languages that predated human speech. I saw the turn coming too late. "Jake, slow down." He tried, but we were going too fast. The truck skidded, fishtailed, and then we were off the road. Time seemed to slow down as we went airborne, arced through the darkness, and slammed into red sandstone with a crunch of metal and shattering glass. The airbags deployed. The world went white, then black, then slowly came back into focus. My head was ringing, blood running down from my scalp where I'd hit something. Jake was slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious but breathing. Tom was in the back seat, pulling himself upright, fumbling for his radio. "All units, Unit 1 is down. We're crashed near Upheaval Dome. Unknown hostiles in pursuit. Require immediate." The windshield exploded inward. Cole's elongated form poured through the opening like smoke, like darkness given substance. He reached for me with fingers that had too many joints, and I felt the protection bundle against my chest, suddenly burning hot, so hot it hurt through my shirt. Cole recoiled, hissing. The darkness of his form flickered, became less solid. He retreated back through the broken windshield, and I heard his layered voice receding. "The meteorite iron. She has the star medal. We'll wait. We'll wait for the ceremony to complete. Then nothing will protect her." He vanished into the night. I sat in the wreckage of our truck, bleeding, disoriented, holding the protection bundle that had just saved my life. Tom was on the radio again, trying to raise anyone. Jake was starting to come around, groaning in pain. "Jake," I managed. "Jake, talk to me." "Crashed," he muttered. "We crashed. Did we hit him? Tell me we hit him." "He's gone. For now." I tried my door. It was jammed. Tom's door opened, and he helped Jake and me out of the truck. We stood in the cold desert night, surrounded by starless darkness, with radio communications breaking up and something vast moving through the sky above us. The new moon had arrived. The ceremony was in progress. And somewhere out there, Ethan and Cole, and whatever they'd become, were completing a ritual that would dissolve the boundaries between our world and the spaces where the Star Watchers lived. My radio crackled one last time. Jake's voice, but it was coming from miles away. He wasn't with us. The Jake standing next to me looked at the radio in confusion. "Maya," the radio Jake said. "I'm pinned. My truck went off the road near White Rim. Something's coming. I can see it in the sky. It's looking at me. It knows my name. Maya, if you can hear this, don't come alone. Don't." Static, then silence. I looked at the Jake next to me. He stared back. That was me. That was my voice. But I'm here. How is that possible? Tom's face was grim. Because space and time work differently when the boundaries break down. Because we're dealing with things that exist outside normal causality. He checked his compass, but the needle was spinning randomly, unable to find north. "We need to get to False Kiva, now, before they complete the ceremony fully." "We're on foot," I said. "Our truck is totaled. Backup isn't responding. And there are things out there that can run faster than we can drive." "Then we walk," Tom said simply. "Because if we don't stop this, if we don't close the door they've opened, everyone in this park dies. Everyone within 100 miles, maybe further. the Star Watchers will pour through, and they'll consume every conscious thought, every moment of awareness, every memory of light. Above us, the starless patch was spreading. Half the sky was dark now, empty of stars, filled instead with something that watched. I could feel its attention, vast and alien and hungry. Margaret's words echoed in my memory. You'll need to perform the counter ritual at the site where they opened the door. 3 offerings: acknowledgement, respect, and choice. False Kiva, I said. We go to False Kiva. We end this. We started walking into the darkness. 3 rangers with flashlights and protocols and protection bundles, heading toward a confrontation with entities that existed in the spaces between stars. Behind us, the wreckage of our truck burned with small flames. Ahead, something vast moved through the starless sky, and I knew with absolute certainty that Anna had faced this same thing in her final moments. The only question was whether I'd survive what she hadn't, whether the counter ritual would work, or whether I'd end up like her, eyes burned white, staring into cosmic horror until my mind broke and my heart stopped. The night was just beginning, and the stars were still disappearing, one by one, erased by something that had been watching us from the darkness since before humans existed. And now we were walking directly toward it. We walked for 40 minutes through darkness that felt alive, aware, hungry. Tom led the way with his flashlight, Jake followed close behind, and I brought up the rear with the protection bundle clutched against my chest. The meteorite iron was still warm, pulsing with heat that seemed to match my heartbeat. The sky above us was mostly empty now, 3/4 of the visible stars erased by spreading darkness. In the void where constellations should have been, I could see movement. Not physical movement, but something dimensional, like watching depth shift in ways that shouldn't be possible. My eyes kept trying to interpret what I was seeing and failing, leaving me nauseous and disoriented. "How much further?" Jake asked. His voice was tight with pain. He'd injured his ribs in the crash, was breathing shallow and controlled. 2 miles, Tom said. Maybe less if we cut through Willow Flat. But I knew I couldn't wait 2 miles. The protection bundle was getting hotter, burning through my shirt now, and I could feel the obsidian shards Margaret had hidden inside beginning to vibrate. They were reacting to something, pointing toward something. The star-wrong places, she'd called them. The locations where the boundaries had been torn. "Tom," I said, stopping. "I need to go alone." He turned, shining his flashlight on my face. "Absolutely not. Protocol 1. Never investigate alone after stars disappear." The protocols were written to protect rangers, but I'm not just a ranger anymore. I'm Black Horse blood, the only one who can perform the counter ritual. I pulled the obsidian from the bundle, 3 shards, each about the size of my thumb, and they were all pointing in the same direction. Northeast, toward the cliff face where False Kiva sat. "These are reacting. Margaret said they'd guide me to where the ceremony is happening, but they're calling to my bloodline specifically. If you come with me, you'll just be in danger. You can't help with what needs to be done." "Maya, you have a concussion and you're bleeding," Jake said. "You can barely walk straight." "Then I'll walk crooked, but I'm going." I met Tom's eyes. Anna tried to do this alone, and it killed her. But she didn't have the training Margaret gave me. She didn't have the protection bundle or the counter ritual. I have a chance she didn't have. Let me take it. Tom was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face illuminated by flashlight beam. Finally, he nodded. "Your grandmother would be proud. Scared for you, but proud." He pulled something from his pocket, a small radio. Take this. It probably won't work with the interference, but try to maintain contact. And Maya, if the ceremony is already complete, if the door is fully open, don't try to close it. Just run. Some things can't be fixed, only survived. I took the radio, checked my own flashlight, adjusted the protection bundle. If I'm not back by dawn, tell my family I tried. You'll be back, Jake said. You're tougher than you look. I left them there and started walking alone into the darkness, following the pull of the obsidian shards. They vibrated in my hand like tuning forks responding to a frequency I couldn't hear, always pointing toward false Kiva, always pulling me forward. The hike took 25 minutes, and every step felt like walking deeper into wrongness. The air was too thick, too heavy, like moving through water. Sounds were distorted, my footsteps echoing in patterns that didn't match my stride, and the darkness above kept pressing down, not physically but psychologically. The weight of vast cosmic attention focused on this one point in the Utah desert. I saw the alcove ahead, lit by an eerie light that didn't come from any normal source. It was bioluminescent somehow, blue-green and pulsing, casting shadows that moved independently of any light source. As I got closer, I could hear chanting, not voices exactly, but sounds that created meaning directly in my brain without passing through my ears. The climb up to the alcove was harder than it should have been. My head was pounding from the concussion, blood had dried sticky on my face, and my hands were shaking from exhaustion and fear. But the obsidian kept pulling me upward, giving me handholds I couldn't quite see, guiding my feet to stable positions. When I reached the alcove, I saw her immediately. Sienna Graves, bound with what looked like astronomical cable, the kind used to secure telescope equipment. She was positioned on the ancient altar stone in the center of the alcove, arms spread, head tilted back. Her eyes were closed and she was unconscious, but I could see her chest rising and falling, still alive, still breathing. Around her, the modified petroglyphs glowed with that same eerie light, and the astronomical equipment hummed with power. The star charts were scattered across the stone floor, all showing the same thing, a gateway. Coordinates that pointed to the spaces between constellations, to the voids where the star watchers lived. And standing at 3 points around the circle were Ethan and Cole and the entity they'd summoned. Ethan had transformed completely now. He was maybe 10 feet tall, impossibly thin, with skin that was less skin and more like solidified darkness. His face had elongated, features stretched into something that suggested humanity, but achieved only mockery of it. His eyes were voids that pulled at my vision, making me dizzy to look at directly. Cole was worse. His transformation had been less controlled, leaving him more creature than person. He crouched on all fours at the western point of the circle, but his limbs bent in too many places and his spine curved in ways that should have been anatomically impossible. When he opened his mouth, I saw that the teeth I'd glimpsed earlier went all the way down his throat. But the entity between them was what made my mind start to fracture. It was vast. Not physically vast, it was maybe 12 feet tall, but vast in dimension, in presence, in the way it occupied space that shouldn't exist. Looking at it was like trying to see a 4-dimensional object through 3-dimensional eyes. My brain kept trying to make sense of angles that weren't angles, of limbs that extended in directions that weren't part of normal geometry. It was made of the absence of light, a humanoid shape carved from the darkness between stars, and it watched me with awareness that predated human consciousness by eons. "Maya Red Cloud," Ethan said, and his voice had the same layered harmonics as Cole's. multiple frequencies speaking in unison. You came. We knew you would. Black horse blood always returns to finish what was started. I stepped into the alcove, keeping my hand on the protection bundle. Let Sienna go. She's not part of this. She is the offering, the anchor, the final component of the gateway. Ethan moved closer, his too tall form casting shadows that writhed independently. Your grandmother tried this counter-ritual in 1974. She stood where you're standing now, holding the same meteorite iron, speaking the same prayers. It failed. The Star Watchers showed her what lives between the stars, and her mind couldn't survive the knowledge. She spent 30 years in a psychiatric facility, drawing the same symbol over and over. The shape of what she saw in the spaces between light, a shape that doesn't exist in 3 dimensions. My grandmother failed because she wasn't prepared. Margaret has taught me what I need to know. Cole laughed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with static. Margaret is old, weak, clinging to ceremonies that worked when the universe was younger. But the boundaries are thinning, Maya. The walls between dimensions are wearing down. What we're doing here isn't wrong, it's inevitable. We're just accelerating the process. The entity had been silent, but now it spoke. Not with sound, but directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. And with its voice came images, memories that weren't mine. Anna's memories. I saw through her eyes, felt through her skin. She was at Angel Arch, hiding behind a rock formation, watching Ethan and Cole perform their ceremony. She was terrified but determined, phone in her hand trying to record evidence. Then the entity appeared, descending from the starless sky, and she couldn't look away. It saw her, focused its attention on her, and it showed her what existed in the darkness between stars. Infinite voids filled with awareness, consciousnesses older than galaxies, vast beyond comprehension, watching our universe the way we might watch bacteria in a petri dish. Not malevolent, not benevolent, just aware and hungry and utterly alien to anything human minds could process. Anna screamed, tried to run. But the entity caught her, held her frozen while it took her eyes, burned away her vision with cosmic radiation, showed her directly what she'd been seeing filtered through her optic nerves. She felt 6 minutes of absolute terror, begging for death, begging for release, understanding too late that some knowledge destroys you just by being known. Maya, help me. Anna's voice in the memory, high-pitched with agony. It's taking my eyes. It's showing me what's behind the stars. Please kill me. Please. Then darkness. Then nothing. Anna's last thought was my name. I was crying, tears streaming down my face, but I forced myself to stay standing. The entity watched me with something that might have been curiosity or might have been hunger. Its voice returned to my mind. Join us. See what Anna saw. See the truth behind the light. Become a window to infinity. Your sister resisted, and it destroyed her. But you're stronger. You have Black Horse blood, training, preparation. You could survive the transition. Become something more than human. Transcend your dimensional limitations. For a moment, I was tempted. The entity was offering answers to questions that had haunted humanity since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what existed in the darkness between them. Knowledge that went beyond physics, beyond astronomy, beyond anything science could discover. The truth about what the universe really was, what consciousness really was, what existed outside our narrow slice of perceivable reality. But then I thought about Anna's final moments, the terror in her memories, the way she'd begged for death because living with that knowledge was worse than dying. The entity wasn't offering transcendence. It was offering annihilation of everything that made us human. Our scale, our limitations, our merciful ignorance of cosmic horrors. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the tears. "My sister didn't die to feed you. She died fighting you. And I'm finishing what she started." I pulled out the obsidian blade Margaret had given me, the white sage, the corn pollen, and the meteorite iron, the components of the counter ritual. Ethan moved to stop me, but the protection bundle flared with heat, creating a barrier he couldn't cross. He hissed, retreating. "You can't close what's already open," he said. "The gateway is established. The Star Watchers are coming through. Then I'll close it with them halfway through." I moved to the northern point of the circle, placed the obsidian blade on the stone. The volcanic glass was dark, solid, representing earth and physical reality. "First offering, I acknowledge you exist in the spaces between stars. I acknowledge that the darkness is full, not empty. I acknowledge your awareness, your consciousness, your hunger." The entity's attention focused on me completely. I felt its regard like pressure, like being crushed under the weight of cosmic scales. But I continued. I moved to the southern point, placed the meteorite iron on the stone. The star metal was hot, burning my fingers, but I held it steady. "Second offering, I respect that your realm and ours must remain separate. I respect the boundaries between dimensions. I respect that some knowledge destroys those who possess it, and that destruction serves no purpose but entropy." The entity shifted, its form becoming less stable. I felt resistance, like trying to push through invisible barriers. But the meteorite iron was working, creating a field that repelled the star-born entity, the way magnets repel each other. Ethan screamed, "Stop her! She's closing the gateway!" Cole lunged at me, but I raised the protection bundle, and he burned where he touched it, his darkness-made flesh sizzling against the star metal's influence. I moved to the center, to where Sienna lay bound on the altar. I pulled out Margaret's knife, a simple blade of worked flint, and cut my palm deep enough to hurt, deep enough to bleed freely. Third offering, I choose to close this gateway with Black Horse blood freely given. Not my death, but my sacrifice. Not my destruction, but my choice. I choose boundaries. I choose limitation. I choose human scale and human ignorance, and the mercy of not knowing what watches from the dark. I let 7 drops of blood fall onto the ancient altar stone, the same stone that had been used for ceremonies for 1,000 years. My blood mixed with stone dust and time, and the accumulated prayers of people who'd stood here before, maintaining the boundaries their ancestors had established. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The entity screamed. It was a sound that shattered stone, that broke light into component wavelengths, that made reality itself crack along fault lines I couldn't see. It was the sound of stars dying, of galaxies collapsing, of entropy accelerating toward heat death. It was a sound that shouldn't exist in our dimension, and hearing it cost me something fundamental, a piece of my sanity that I'd never get back. Ethan and Cole were burning, not with fire, but with light, with the opposite of the darkness they'd become. They blazed like photographs held over flame, curling and blackening and disintegrating into ash that was carried away on wind that didn't exist. Their screams harmonized with the entities, creating chords of agony and frequencies that made my teeth ache and my bones vibrate. The entity was being pulled backward, sucked into the void it had emerged from. It fought, its form stretching and distorting as it tried to maintain contact with our dimension. For a moment, I saw it clearly. Saw what it really was beneath the humanoid shape it wore. Something vast and tentacled and made of angles that hurt to perceive. Then it was gone, pulled back through the closing gateway, and reality snapped shut like a door slamming. The stars returned, not slowly, not gradually, but all at once. The void in the sky filled with light, constellations rushing back into their proper positions like water filling a vacuum. Cassiopeia, Andromeda, Perseus, Ursa Major, all of them returning, and the relief of seeing them where they belonged was so intense I sobbed. The modified astronomical equipment exploded, lenses shattering, instruments collapsing in on themselves as the forces holding them together failed. The star charts burst into flame, consumed by normal fire that looked almost comforting after the cosmic horror of the entities burning. I collapsed next to Sienna on the altar, my hand still bleeding, exhaustion and pain and relief washing over me in waves. I cut her bonds with the flint knife, checked her pulse, still alive, still breathing. She'd been unconscious for the entire ritual, spared from seeing what Anna had seen. Dawn was breaking. I could see the first light touching the eastern horizon, turning the canyon walls from black to red to orange to gold. Normal colors, normal light, normal physics reasserting themselves over a landscape that had temporarily become something else. My radio crackled. Tom's voice, distant and distorted, but audible. Maya, respond. The stars came back. Did it work? It worked. I managed, my voice hoarse. Gateway closed, suspects neutralized, Sienna Graves alive and breathing. Need medical evac to False Kiva. Copy that. Help is on the way. You did it, Ranger Red Cloud. You closed the door. I sat there in the growing light, holding my bleeding hand, staring at the stars as they faded with the approaching sunrise. I'd seen what existed between them. I'd heard the entity's voice in my mind, felt its awareness, understood a fraction of what it comprehended. That knowledge would never leave me. I'd carry it forever, the way my grandmother had carried it, the way it had eventually broken her. But I'd chosen this, chosen to bear that burden so others wouldn't have to, so the gateway would stay closed, so the boundaries would remain intact. Anna had died fighting this. Now I'd survived finishing what she started. As the sun fully rose over Canyonlands, washing the red rocks in warm light, I finally understood what my grandmother had tried to tell me all those years ago. The land remembers things people forget. The sky watches things people don't see. And some of us are called to stand between the watching and the watched, maintaining boundaries that most people never know exist. I was a starkeeper now, like Margaret, like my grandmother had tried to be. Someone who knew what lived in the darkness and chose to keep it there, no matter the cost to her own peace of mind. The stars were back where they belonged. That would have to be enough. 3 months later, winter had come to Canyonlands. Snow dusted the red rocks, transforming the landscape into something even more alien and beautiful. The temperature hovered around 20 degrees at night, and the stars were brilliant in the cold, clear air. I checked them constantly now, counting constellations, making sure they stayed where they belonged, making sure no voids appeared in the darkness. The nightmares had started 2 weeks after False Kiva. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the entity, felt its attention, heard Anna's memories screaming in my head. Margaret said it would get better with time. She was lying, to be kind. It wouldn't get better. You don't unsee what exists between the stars. You just learn to function despite knowing. But I was functioning. The Park Service had promoted me to lead wilderness ranger, a position that came with a significant pay increase and responsibilities that weren't listed in any official job description. Tom had explained it simply. Official title is Lead Wilderness Ranger. Unofficial title is the ranger we call when reality stops making sense. Higher pay, worse nightmares. Welcome to the club. There were 12 of us scattered across different parks and wilderness areas. Rangers who'd seen things that didn't fit in incident reports, who'd learned to work with traditional knowledge keepers, who maintained boundaries that most people never knew existed. We had a private communication channel, encrypted reports, protocols that went beyond the ones hanging on the ranger station wall. Today was the recognition ceremony. Margaret So had organized it, bringing together 7 elders from Navajo and Hopi communities. They met me at sunrise near Dead Horse Point, a mesa that overlooked thousands of square miles of canyon country. The view was stunning, the kind of landscape that made you feel simultaneously insignificant and connected to something eternal. The elders formed a circle, and I stood in the center. Margaret led the ceremony, speaking in Navajo, her clouded eyes somehow seeing more than mine ever would. She burned white sage and cedar, the smoke carrying prayers into the cold morning air. The other elders added their voices, creating harmonies that reminded me uncomfortably of the entity's layered speech. Except, this was human, grounded, safe. When the prayers concluded, Margaret approached me with a new protection bundle. This one was larger, heavier, wrapped in red cloth embroidered with symbols I didn't recognize. "You did what your grandmother couldn't," she said, her voice carrying across the circle. "Closed the gateway and survived with your mind intact. But you'll carry the weight. You've seen between the stars, Maya. That sight doesn't leave you. You'll dream of voids and entities and cosmic scales that make human concern seem meaningless. The knowledge will eat at you some days, make you question why you bother protecting a species that's so small and temporary." She pressed the bundle into my hands. "This will help. Stronger protection, more layers of defense. But the real protection comes from choice. You chose to maintain boundaries. You chose human scale over cosmic transcendence. Remember that choice when the weight gets heavy." "Thank you," I managed. "All of you, for teaching me, for trusting me." One of the Hopi elders, a man who looked to be 90 or older, stepped forward. "Your grandmother, Agnes, she was my cousin. I visited her in the facility where they kept her, tried to help her make sense of what she'd seen. She drew for 30 years, trying to map the shape of what existed between the stars, a shape that doesn't fit in 3 dimensions. He touched my shoulder gently. "She would be proud of you. Proud you succeeded where she failed. But she would also warn you. Don't look too long at what you've seen. Don't try to understand it too deeply. Some knowledge destroys the knower." The ceremony ended as the sun fully rose, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson. The elders left, returning to their communities, leaving me with Margaret. "How are you really doing?" she asked. "I see it every time I close my eyes. The entity, the voids, Anna's memories." I stared out at the canyon landscape. Some days, I wonder if it would have been easier to let them win, to not know what I know now. Yes, it would have been easier, but everyone would be dead or worse. You chose hard survival over easy destruction. That's what Starkeepers do. She handed me a thermos of hot coffee. "Drink. You have training today. The counter ritual worked because you followed the structure, but there are variations. Different entities, different gateways, different offerings required. You need to know them all." I spent the afternoon with Margaret, learning ceremonies that had been passed down for generations, modified and adapted as new threats emerged. It was exhausting, mentally and spiritually, but necessary. The work didn't end with closing one gateway. It never ended. That evening, I drove to the small cemetery on the outskirts of Moab where Anna was buried. Spanish Valley Cemetery, a quiet place with scattered juniper trees and views of the La Salle Mountains in the distance. Her grave was in the newer section, the headstone simple granite with her name, dates, and the inscription she'd requested in her will. She walked in beauty. I sat on the cold ground next to her grave, tracing the letters of her name. "I understand now why you went alone that night," I said quietly. "Why you didn't call for backup. You thought you could stop them before anyone else got hurt. You were always trying to protect me, even at the end. Remember when we were kids and that dog came after me? You stepped between us without hesitation, got bit instead of me. That's who you were, someone who put herself between danger and the people she loved." The wind picked up, carrying red dust across the cemetery. "I'm protecting people now too, using what you discovered. Your death wasn't meaningless, Anna. It was a warning, and I heard it. I understood it. I finished what you started." I placed a small piece of meteorite iron on her headstone. "The stars are back where they belong. The gateway is closed, and I'm keeping watch to make sure it stays that way." I sat there until the sun set, until the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Cassiopeia, Andromeda, Ursa Major, all in their proper places, all where they should be. For now. My radio crackled. Jake's voice. "Maya, we've got something. Hikers at Delicate Arch reporting unusual astronomical phenomena. They say the Milky Way is moving, quote, moving like something is swimming through it. Tom wants us to check it out." I stood, brushing cemetery dirt from my pants. "Copy that. I'll meet you at the station in 20 minutes. Sienna Graves had recovered physically, though the psychological scars would take longer to heal. She was in witness protection now, working with astronomers and archaeologists to identify other corrupted ritual sites across the Southwest. Her testimony had helped authorities understand that she'd been manipulated by Ethan and Cole, drawn into their research under false pretenses, drugged, and used as an unwilling anchor for their ceremony. She remembered everything from the moment the entity appeared, had seen what I'd seen, and was living with the same knowledge. We emailed occasionally. She was doing better than expected, channeling her experience into prevention work, making sure others didn't fall into the same trap, turning trauma into purpose. I met Jake at the ranger station. He looked tired. He'd been having his own nightmares since that night. We'd both seen too much, but we were both still here, still working, still maintaining the boundaries. "Delicate Arch," he said, pulling up the location on the map. "Multiple hikers reporting it. Started about an hour ago. They say the Milky Way looks like it's undulating, like something massive is moving through it." I checked my protection bundle, made sure the meteorite iron was secure. "Could be atmospheric distortion, could be something else. Let's go find out." We geared up, reviewed the protocols, double-checked our equipment. Tom came out to brief us, his expression serious but not panicked. This was the new normal for us. Calls that might be nothing, or might be evidence that something was testing the boundaries again. "Be careful out there," Tom said. "And Maya, if it's what we think it is, don't try to close it alone. Call for backup. We have resources now. Other star keepers, elders on standby. You don't have to do this by yourself." "Copy that." Jake and I drove out as the last light faded from the sky. The road to Delicate Arch was familiar now, the landscape less alien than it had been 3 months ago. Or maybe I was the one who'd changed, who'd adapted to seeing the wilderness as something more than scenery and wildlife, something layered, dimensional, full of presences that predated human occupation. As we drove, I thought about the path that had brought me here. Anna's death, the investigation, the confrontation at False Kiva, the moment I'd chosen to close the gateway instead of stepping through it, to remain human instead of transcending into something else. It had been the right choice. I knew that. But some nights I wondered what I'd given up, what knowledge I'd refused, what cosmic secrets I'd turned away from. Those were the dangerous thoughts, the ones Margaret warned against. The temptation to look back at the door you'd closed and wonder what was on the other side. We reached the delicate arch trailhead and hiked in with headlamps, following the well-worn path through slick rock and sandstone. Other hikers were coming down, faces pale, talking rapidly about what they'd seen. We took brief statements, documented their reports, then continued up. At the arch, we found 3 families who'd come for sunset photos and stayed because they couldn't stop watching the sky. I looked up and saw what they meant. The Milky Way was visible, a river of stars across the darkness. But it was moving, pulsing, like something enormous was swimming through it, displacing the light with its passage. Jesus, Jake breathed. That's new. I pulled out the obsidian shards, held them up. They weren't vibrating, weren't pointing toward any star-wrong places. Whatever was up there, it wasn't trying to come through. It was just passing by, moving through the spaces between stars on its own incomprehensible journey. It's okay, I told the families. What you're seeing is rare but not dangerous, an astronomical phenomenon. We'll stay here and monitor it. You should head back down before it gets too dark to hike safely. They left, relieved to have permission to stop watching something their brains couldn't quite process. When we were alone, Jake looked at me. What is it really? Something massive, moving through the voids, not trying to come through, just existing in its own dimension. I watched the Milky Way undulate, felt a deep unease but not the immediate terror that accompanied gateway openings. The boundaries are holding. It's staying in its realm. We're staying in ours. Will there be more of these? Jake asked. More sightings, more incidents? Yes. The entity Ethan summoned, it wasn't the only one. There are thousands of them, millions maybe, existing in the spaces between stars. Most of them don't care about our dimension, but some do. Some are curious, some are hungry, and some will find people like Ethan who are willing to open doors that should stay closed. I looked at Jake. This is the job now, not just traffic stops and lost hikers, watching for cosmic incursions, maintaining boundaries, being the thing that stands between humanity and the vast awareness that exists in the darkness. Sounds exhausting. It is, but someone has to do it. We watched until the Milky Way stopped moving, until the stars stabilized and the sky returned to normal. Then we hiked back down, filed our reports, and prepared for whatever came next. My name is Maya Redcloud. I'm a park ranger at Canyonlands National Park in Utah. But that's not the whole truth. I'm also a star keeper, someone who maintains the boundaries between our world and the spaces between stars. I protect people from things that exist in the voids between light, from entities that predate human civilization, that watched this land before the ancestral Puebloans built their cities in the cliff faces, before the dinosaurs walked these red rocks, before Earth's atmosphere was breathable. The stars aren't just distant suns burning in the vacuum of space. They're boundaries, markers, points of light that define where our dimension ends and something else begins. and the spaces between them, those vast, dark distances we perceive as emptiness, those spaces are full of awareness, full of hunger, full of things that watch and wait and sometimes try to reach through into our reality. This is what I do. I keep the stars in their proper places. I keep the darkness where it belongs. I learn the ceremonies that close gateways, the prayers that maintain boundaries, the sacrifices required to protect human scale from cosmic horror. And I won't stop, no matter how many times I have to look up into a starless sky and face what lives in the voids. My sister Anna died fighting this. She saw what existed between the stars, and it killed her. But her death taught me what I needed to know, gave me the warning I needed to hear, showed me the path I needed to walk. I carry her memory with me every time I look at the night sky, every time I count constellations to make sure they're still there, every time I feel the weight of cosmic knowledge pressing against my mind, threatening to break me the way it broke my grandmother. But I also carry the protection bundles Margaret gave me, the meteorite iron forged from stars, the obsidian formed from Earth's fire, the prayers passed down through generations of people who understood that some boundaries must be maintained, no matter the cost. Winter has come to Canyonlands. The stars are brilliant in the cold, clear air, and I'm still here, still watching, still keeping the darkness at bay. This is what I do. This is who I am. And this is the work that never ends, as long as the stars shine and the voids between them remain hungry. My name is Maya Red Cloud. I'm a star keeper, and I'll keep the light where it belongs until the day I die.